Sometimes I jestfully wonder if I've officially joined the old people population at a mere 21 years old. I mean, the consoles I grew up with are ancient in terms of technology. I watched VHS tapes as a kid, and I vividly remember things that happened at this point 10 years ago or older. It's relevant because, like I said in last week's video, this weekend marks the 10th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 2. I consciously remember it being announced back in 2012 when my media diet solely consisted of YouTube game reviews and Let's Plays. At the time, I lamented the fact that I didn't have an account in any of the console's digital storefronts, meaning I couldn't play the new game outside of its mobile port, as I soaked up all the YouTube content in the game I could find. I mean, it was a new Sonic game after all. This game turning 10 years old is just the weirdest thing for me. This game being the last Sonic game released when I was a kid, before middle school, the 8th generation of consoles, Sonic Lost World, all that stuff. It just makes me feel old in a way I didn't when Generations turned 10 years old last year, and Colors turning 10 years old the year before that. Not that I didn't feel that way, mind you. It's funny that I think of this game in such a nostalgic fashion because the game itself is the embodiment of mediocrity. But to explain why that is, I suppose that means we should go back in time 10 years and explore the context surrounding Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 2. Sonic 4 Episode 1 released back in 2010, and I think it was an interesting turning point for the Sonic franchise, alongside Sonic Colors, which was released a few weeks later. Sonic 4 was different in that it mainly relied upon nostalgic level themes and had no characters in it besides Sonic and Eggman like we were back in Sonic 1. This clearly worked for Sega, as after years of bad press from the games of the mid to late 2000s, they were shown how powerful nostalgia really was when it came to Sonic. I have a rather cynical view regarding Episode 1 of Sonic 4 because of the fact that I think the game is utterly abysmal. For those who haven't seen the video I did on it back in August, I thought it played quite poorly, had frustrating levels, basically no original ideas to its name. It was just a husk of nothing with the name Sonic 4 slapped on top. In truth, Sonic 4 Episode 1 was meant to be a mobile phone game, and by those standards it's fine, I suppose, but I just hate how Sega got away with upcharging us for that cheap mobile game and were met with praise from critics for doing so because it was an unoriginal throwback game that pretty much everyone regards as a cheap mobile game these days. Because we now have seen how much better a retro Sonic revival can be with Sonic Mania from 2017. But Episode 1 did its job back when it was new, as the main issues people did have with Episode 1, the lacking physics engine and the usage of modern Sonic's design, got addressed in 2011's Sonic Generations, which had, maybe not Genesis-accurate physics, but decent speed and momentum on its own, and the return of classic Sonic. I can't say enough great things about Sonic Generations. It was a fantastic game. Even by the release of Generations, I'd say people were starting to sour on Episode 1 because it was pretty clear that the game, while functional, had little replay value compared to the Genesis games that people were still enjoying 20 years later, including Sonic CD, which was remastered and made widely available in 2011. Colors and Generations proved themselves as really good 3D Sonic games that also offered plenty for players to keep coming back to. So when holding Episode 1 to that standard, it just fell flat. However, they still felt the need to continue the Sonic 4 saga with Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2, which first released on May 15th of 2012. And they tried to get people pretty hyped for it, as they claimed the events of Sonic CD were going to be important for Episode 2, which is why they needed to do that remaster for Sonic CD, so go buy that now! As Metal Sonic was in that game, and he was teased at the very end of Episode 1. This game also got hyped up for bringing Tails back as a playable character. The last time you could play as him before this was Sonic Rivals 2, and these games were 5 years apart, and now that's just how long it's been since the last mainline Sonic game, so how about that? But this time, critics were much less kind to it. Episode 2 across the board was met with a mixed response, critics saying that while it did make improvements from the issues plaguing Episode 1, it still didn't really do much on its own to stand up alongside the Genesis originals. Which is basically how I feel about Episode 2, it's just kind of okay on its own, and really goes to show how the whole Sonic 4 project was a mistake. This dates back to when Sega of America decided that Sonic the Portable, a short game for mobile phones, had to be a main series console game. Its short length had to be made up for by calling it Episode 1. This inherently set up the expectation that we'd get more of these games, and in the long run would hopefully make up for the fact that Episode 1 didn't feel that good to play and didn't offer much on its own merits. So the next game had shackled itself to Episode 1, even if they probably wanted to move on from that game and do something new and interesting. I have that belief because the name Episode 2 implies it's the same game as Episode 1, Sonic 4, but these two games just don't feel the same to play or even to look at. For starters, the visuals have been completely overhauled. Episode 1 tried going for this, I'm not actually sure how to describe it. Sonic looked like he was made of moissanite, and the areas he ran around in looked like plastic in the foreground with noticeable lines in the seams, but the backgrounds just looked super low poly on top of that. The game was unappealing visually, to say the least. Episode 2 still has things that look weak, like the moving GIFs on the title screen that don't have half the frames of animation as the games on the Genesis, but the game did at least go for a proper HD art style, with character models that are lit alongside the environments they run around, and many of these environments look nice. All the acts of Sylvania Castle Zone have good lighting and visuals. I like the contrast between the lights and the winter atmosphere of White Park, and Sky Fortress looking nice at sunset. Sonic's running animation looks jank, but besides that, I think when you play Episode 2, it looks like what you would expect from an HD 2D title in 2012. The reason I stress the visuals this early on in the video is because this is the first degree of separation between Episodes 1 and 2, two games that are supposedly the same game. Compare that to Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and the game that released later that year, Sonic and Knuckles. We all know now that these two games are meant to be one, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but for marketing reasons they had to be separated. But just look at how Sonic and Knuckles features all the same mechanics from Sonic 3, the same sprite sheet for Sonic, and how it continues directly from where Sonic 3 left off. Episode 2 in many ways tries to improve from Episode 1, being its own thing, like in the visual department, but then ties itself down to Episode 1 at the same time. Another way they tried hyping people up for Episode 2 was with the supposed return of lock-on technology that got used back on the Genesis to allow players to access the true Sonic 3 experience. In Episode 2, lock-on technology is just a quick DLC mission starring Metal Sonic called Episode Metal. It's funny, I was unsure of why it hadn't unlocked when I started playing Episode 2 for the video, but then I realized it was because I uninstalled Episode 1 after the last video like I said I was going to. Thank God the video's over. Now I never have to play Sonic 4 ever again and can just uninstall it from my PC. That sounds fun. I can't fault Episode Metal too much. It's just that as a feature they really hyped up as the thing connecting the two games, it's so lame. It's revealed that Metal Sonic got left behind by Eggman on Little Planet back in Sonic CD and just sent a screen after him to make him come back to Earth. Now, Eggman needs his help creating a second Death Egg surrounding Little Planet. But to power up, Metal Sonic needs to play through one act of Mad Gear Zone, Lost Labyrinth Zone, Casino Street Zone, and Splash Hill Zone, the levels of Episode 1 that I already don't like. And we do it as Metal Sonic, a model swap of Sonic, so we don't even have any new powers to work with. It's a mode that lasts like 15 minutes and it's just lame. Also, it's funny how the setup is that Little Planet left, but we clearly see that this is the bad future of Stardust Speedway from Sonic CD, meaning it wouldn't have. This discrepancy happens because they just reused the assets from the Metal Sonic boss fight in Sonic Generations, so that's a big oops. And Episode Metal was a big waste of the player's time used to make people more excited for Episode 2. A game that, at its core, doesn't really play like Episode 1. On paper, many things are shared, like the spin dash and the homing attack, but the feel of Sonic is completely different. They promised to fix the physics, and so they have these big slopes at the beginning of the game to make sure the gamers know that rolling down a hill will make Sonic gain speed in this one. He also doesn't uncurl from his ball form when in midair, so that's another improvement. However, I'll say this. The designers made it so that you can't really appreciate the fact that Episode 2 feels better to play than Episode 1 because the level design tropes are littered with the same things that brought Episode 1 down. In numerous stages, your progression is still locked to an abundance of springs and dash pads that carry you from place to place. White Park Act 2 could have been an interesting stage where you gain speed on this roller coaster ride, but it is instead a boring show where the game plays itself for almost its entire run. Oil Desert is also very guilty of this effect. Homing attack chains still rule the roost in this game. More baffling because they made sure to keep Sonic in his ball form when getting off of slopes with the intent of decreasing the homing attack's necessity, and yet the game litters levels with enemies you must homing attack to reach different paths. If you were curious, Tails is in this game but is not playable in the single player. Guess they were still a little afraid of allowing the gamers to play as someone other than Sonic at this point. Instead, Tails' purpose in Episode 2 are these new combo moves where you press square in the air to see Tails fly Sonic through the air, albeit with a really short time limit before he tires out, especially when compared to other games with the same mechanic. Underwater, Tails can fly Sonic around with no limit on duration, which I think is a good use of Tails' being able to swim. Although I guess Tails being weighed down by Sonic when carrying him underwater in Sonic 3 technically makes more sense than this. Lastly, the combo move on the ground sees Sonic and Tails get into 69 formation. Don't Google it. This form is so powerful that it blows through every enemy and obstacle, making it useful when I don't feel like playing anymore and want the game to play itself even more than it already does. I think the combo moves are nice, but Sonic Advance 3 just had it with way more depth since the playable roster was way bigger, giving you more combos to experiment with, and it also didn't take 5 seconds to start and stop like it does in Episode 2. So Episode 2 can't even claim that to be its defining element. A game where Tails, like I said, is only really here for these moves, and nothing else since you can't play as him in single player. But you can in the dreadful multiplayer. Most games with a multiplayer element are just a lot more fun when playing them with friends than they are alone, but Episode 2 is absolutely the opposite of that. Not that you'd find a lobby of people playing this game in 2022, so I had to draft Jeb to play it with me, and I was shocked at how bad it was. First, the lag is pretty awful when we both had a good connection. Second, this is a game where the goal is to run fast, but the two players share the same screen. If one player outran the other player, then the other player will just turn into a ball that you have to press the A button to get out of, killing the pace of the game. This isn't dissimilar to how it was using the second controller to play as Tails in the Genesis, but this is a core mode from a game made in 2012. You'd think they'd be better than this by now. The pace is also slowed down because the person playing as Tails has to deal with landing from his flight, literally killing all your forward momentum. Third, both players can activate the tag action, and if you played the single player, you'd know that you need to press the jump button to fly into the air, but in the multiplayer, only the person playing as Tails has to do that. But if the Sonic player does it, it will end the combo flight, messing with your gameplay. And I can't even begin to imagine how chaotic it would be if you were playing with someone who isn't in the same voice chat as you with all these problems happening. And once all that is said and done, you have to play Sky Fortress Act 1, where the Sonic player has to attack enemies while the Tails player has to control the plane and try to keep up with the Sonic player. It's such a mess. In the single player, I got bored of this level really fast, but in multiplayer, it's where we just decided we had enough.
I'm trying to dodge!
Sonic.
Oh! What the?
You got.
No.
I can't. There's no. I'm done. Yeah, that is enough. I've seen enough.
Seriously, the multiplayer for this game was the most unfun thing I have played in a hot minute, when in single player it was merely mediocre. A game that, like its predecessor, prides itself for its own mediocrity. Only this time through the filter of self-awareness. Here we go. Episode 1, the game with zero original ideas, obviously got flack for it, so Episode 2 decides to poke fun at that. Starting in the boss fight of Sylvania Castle Zone, as the player must wait 40 seconds for the boss to begin as we go through this routine where the game pretends it's about to recycle the boss of Aquatic Ruin Zone from Sonic 2. Something you'd probably be afraid of when the whole level had vibes of Aquatic Ruin mixed with Marble Garden from Sonic 3. The actual boss you fight, like all the bosses in this game, drags on for an eternity with long wind-up animations and lengthy invincibility frames. So even when the stand-up routine is done, I'm still not pleased. But anyway, maybe the game trying to be self-aware would land a bit better if the game didn't have the self-awareness of a gnat. They literally make fun of Episode 1 for having no new ideas, playing on your expectations for the sequel to do the same, and then they have Sky Fortress Zone at the end of the game, a shameless copy of Wing Fortress Zone from Sonic 2. And it has these special stages that are the same structure as the ones from Sonic 2 as well. If you're gonna make fun of recycled content, I just don't get why they'd recycle more content anyway. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it's completely random, too. If you didn't know all the backstory I just set up, this joke doesn't even make sense. It's just 40 seconds of standing there, which of course becomes a real thing in Sonic going forward. Things that require internet discourse context to make sense of. And that's the thing with Episode 2 of Sonic 4. It's not some bad game. I don't think players of it, single player anyway, are walking out of this game thinking it was really frustrating or crappy or whatever. But instead, it's just really bland and mediocre. Maybe it has a couple good ideas, but none of them really warrant you playing the game more than once. It doesn't have that many levels, it isn't super fun, so it's just kinda there. Being there is much better than Episode 1, which I think is a terrible game, but Episode 2 holds itself back from being more by sticking heavily to the structure of Episode 1 and associating itself with Episode 1, as even if 2 isn't that bad, it's forever going to be attached to the first one. I thought it was worth framing this video around the game being 10 years old because like I said, this game really showed just how much of a bust the whole Sonic 4 thing really was. Since this game is a very half-hearted sequel that doesn't even get the chance to do anything new, and in hindsight, that's clearer than ever. Episode 2 ends on this cliffhanger where Little Planet is still trapped inside the new Death Egg, but when the game launched, they already knew they had no intentions of following up on it, as it was confirmed that Episode 2 was the last part of Sonic 4 before the game even released. The mediocre response to Episode 2 probably made them feel even more secure in that decision. 3 years later, it was confirmed that Sonic 4 Episode 3 was something they planned on doing at the start, but they just scrapped it, and I can see why. If they kept going with this direction, it probably would have been a game with a half-hearted inclusion of Knuckles, more pseudo-bring-back stages, and mediocre level designs. Sonic 4 was just a terrible project in hindsight. And the craziest part of it all is that these games have no legacy either. Both episodes of Sonic 4 were digital only, so when the storefronts hosting them are gone, Sonic 4 will just be gone forever and that will be the end of it. But it didn't have to be this way. Sonic Mania goes to show that proper dev time and budget can result in a project that makes fans of all ages happy with, yes, brought back stages, but also fully original ideas and authentic gameplay. And I'm not even some super big fan of that game, but the truth is the truth. I think Sega overworked Dimps just as much as they did Sonic Team, with 5 releases from them in the span of 3 years. So of course, of this pile, only one of them really turned out truly good, and the rest all suffer from larger issues. But hey, speaking of Sega rushing out trash and scrapping ideas, next week is the long-awaited review of Sonic Free Riders. That should be entertaining. But that's all we have for this one, so in the meantime, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.